Divorce is difficult, no doubt about it, but it happens, and if you are going through it, you need help. Kirk Stange is the founding partner and president of Stange Law Firm, and he's joining Wendy and me and Connor on the phone to help. And also the Royal Banks, Missouri text line 84126 is open if you have any questions for Kirk. Good morning, Kirk. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Hi.
What level of service do people need from their family law attorneys? Because it's such an emotional time for both parties, but I think especially for the party who didn't see it coming.
I think it depends on the individual in terms of what they need. I mean, some individuals have really complicated cases, and maybe they're they're emotional, they're a little bit more needy, and they need a lot of attention. I know some folks are kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. They want to keep the cost of divorce low, and they just want to interact with their attorney when they must in order to get that divorce done. So I think it's really important for a client to know what they're looking for and then interview attorneys and find an attorney that's going to give them that level of service that they need.
What are some of the things that people can do when they are going through a family law matter? And I hate to use the term because it's really overused, but it's true here, Kirk. Self-care, if you will.
It's huge. It's huge. I think being in a good emotional place is vital, particularly if somebody's going through a complicated divorce, a hard divorce. So I think there's all kinds of things, but I think counseling is important. I think most individuals going through a divorce ought to find a counselor to talk to, and I think that can be great in terms of getting some outside input and being in a good, emotional, happy place. I think positive books. You know, there's lots of podcasts out there folks can listen to that are free online. I mean, I think that's vital. I think doing the things you enjoy. So if there's things in life you like, whether it's going to sporting events or exercising or whatever, I think continuing that is really important so you're not just obsessing and thinking about the divorce 24/7. And then I think spending time with family, friends, and loved ones. I think being alone when you're going through a divorce can be sort of the enemy. So being around supportive people, caring people, I think can really help lift somebody up.
Do the courts care about infidelity? I know we used to talk about alienation of affection. Mm-hmm. Does that still exist as a legal issue?
Well, most states have abolished alienation of affections. I think there's a few states that still technically have it on the books, and that's when you can sue the paramour or the person who's having the affair with a spouse. But it's very rare in this day and age and not commonplace. I mean, in terms of affairs, the laws in states vary. Some states still have conduct of the parties during the marriage is a factor that the courts can look at. Other states have taken it out. So, I mean, sort of interestingly, in Missouri, it's still a factor courts can look at, but over in Illinois, it's not. And so it's going to depend in part on what state an individual's in. And really, with states where it can be taken into account, it could come into play in terms of the property and debt division and then spousal maintenance. So in Missouri, it is a factor for property and debt division and spousal maintenance, but you know, different judges put more weight to it than others.
Kirk, one of our listeners on our Royal Banks of Missouri text line wants to know this. What are some of the reasons you see, Kirk, that people get divorced? Is it money? Do they fall in love with someone else? Are there common reasons?
You know, there can be all kinds of different reasons, but I think a lot of people probably grow apart. I mean, you just see a lot of that. I mean, they get married and they start in one place and maybe it's fairly unified, and then over time, you know, they evolve, they change, and they kind of want different things in life. So certainly we see a lot of that at our firm where it's really pretty amicable, but people are just in different places and on different roads, if you will. But sure, we see affairs for sure being a cause. You know, domestic violence can lead some people to say, hey, I got to get out of this marriage for safety purposes. And certainly finances can be a big thing. I mean, particularly if you have a saver in the marriage and you got somebody else who's a spender, that can certainly be the source of a lot of friction as well. There's lots of other issues we see as well, but I'd say those are some of the common ones.
From the 314, Kirk, why is it that if a judge has ordered my ex to submit financial information to help pay our daughter's tuition and he doesn't, the courts don't have a follow-up plan? The payments are back on the wife.
Well, I mean, what an individual needs to do in that circumstance if somebody's not complying is make sure that they have an attorney. And then oftentimes, you know, filing a motion, I mean, typically you call it a motion to compel, or it could be a motion for contempt if somebody's just flagrantly in violation of a court order. So, I mean, I understand it can be discouraging, and folks who are maybe hurting money-wise as it is, it's like, goodness, I got to go hire an attorney to try to enforce this. But that's the step, because otherwise, frankly, I mean, a judge might not even know that the party's not in compliance.
Kirk, when you have custody cases, is the mother always favored?
Well, I mean, I think there's been a big movement over the last decade or so, a big push towards shared parenting. I mean, I've been a lawyer about 23 years now. When I first began practicing, I mean, it did seem like there was kind of a tilt toward the moms, and a lot of the dads were getting every other weekend, a night during the week, and extra time in the summer and the holidays. It was called a Siegenthaler parenting plan, which is a Court of Appeals case in Missouri. But there's been a big push over the last decade for shared parenting and 50-50 custody, and we see more and more judges, particularly on the Missouri side of the river, being very, very pro 50-50 and going there as sort of a starting place, and then moving off if the facts call for it. But I think things have gotten a lot better for dads over the last decade.
And we're chatting with Kirk Stange, the founding partner and president of Stange Law Firm. And when we got cut off, Kirk, we were asking you if divorcing couples should continue to live together.
Yeah, I mean, again, if there's going to be violence, if there's arguing in front of the kids and stuff like that, obviously somebody's got to go. I mean, peace and tranquility and not having domestic violence is vital. But, the counter argument at times is that if an individual leaves the home and then they're getting the kids every other weekend, and then a precedent gets set that that's what they're getting, it can create problems for that parent. So oftentimes it makes sense to try to leave in conjunction with a custody order that everybody's happy with out of the gates.
Kirk, a question on a Royal Banks, Missouri text line. Kirk, my ex filed to have my son emancipated. The son just turned 21. He's behind on child support and still owes medical expenses. I'm being told I cannot bring it up by challenging the emancipation. Kirk, do I file a civil case instead?
Obviously, it's really important for a lawyer to look at the paperwork and the details and go through it with more specificity. But look, in a general sense, I mean, if there's still arrearage is owed, then a party ought to still be able to pursue that in most instances through a motion for sums due and owing, or you call it a motion for contempt. But it is true that in Missouri, if this is where the caller is from, emancipation takes place at 21 if the child goes to college. If not, it's at 18. So it would cut off additional arrearages being accrued. But normally for the past arrearages, party can still pursue that.
And in general, should a couple each have their own lawyer, or is there ever a time when they should share a lawyer, or is that called mediation?
No, I mean, a lawyer cannot represent both parties in a divorce. It's a conflict of interest. So one lawyer cannot represent both people. That's prohibited by the rules of professional conduct. So, look, parties can see a mediator. The mediator doesn't represent either party. They're neutral, and then both parties can have their own attorney. And that's normally the way to go if a party's looking to go to mediation. Sometimes a party chooses not to get an attorney, but that's almost always a bad idea. And, yeah, I mean, it's a carte blanche, cut and dry rule that a lawyer cannot represent both parties in a divorce.
Kirk, one issue that needs to be addressed is that after a divorce involving children, unfortunately, one of the divorced parents passes away. A grandparent does not have visitation rights in Illinois.
Well, look, I mean, there's different statutes for grandparent visitation rights in Missouri and Illinois, and look, it really does vary. It does vary by state. And the grandparent visitation issue is a complex issue, which is very, very fact-specific, and you get into lots of courts' opinions on that as well. But I'd say any grandparent in that situation ought to sit down with a lawyer, go through the facts, look through the statute, and see if there's any basis. But sometimes it can be difficult for grandparents in those circumstances to meet the requirements.
Kirk, in your experience, how often does one party try to hide assets? Is that only with very wealthy people? And then how can the other party find those assets?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, sometimes people do it. I mean, it's not the vast majority of cases. I mean, most people are above board don't do it, but every now and again somebody does it. There's multiple ways to figure it out if somebody's doing it. I mean, oftentimes there can be evidence on bank statements of transfers out of accounts. You could see it on tax returns where there's assets that are part of the tax returns that weren't disclosed to the court. So that could be the case as well. Sometimes